the role of civil societies in consolidating peace and in supporting peace efforts is very essential to the success of peacemaking, because we are believers that agreements between governments on their own and by themselves are not sufficient to make peace. And therefore, especially in the case of the Palestinian Israelis, the role of groups on both sides, Palestinians, Arabs, Israelis, and the international support for those efforts is a condition sine qua non for the success of peacemaking. And because of our belief in this, and because under the direction of President Leonel Fernandez, he launched yesterday an initiative calling for what he named as the Alliance for Peace in Latin America, which we would like to see this becoming a global effort. Out of our conviction in the role of civil societies and the role they play in the efforts to make peace, we have dedicated one session, this session actually, to discuss what is this role, how this role can be articulated, and we're going to listen to some of the most prominent activists in this field. Mr. Amr Badr is an old friend of mine. He is one of the most active in Egypt and on the international level in the efforts of people-to-people programs. He is very well known to many people around the world because of his role and because of his efforts. He's going to chair this session. I give the floor to Mr. Amr Badr.
Thank you, Ambassador Hassan. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Mr. President, First Lady of the Dominican Republic, honorable speakers, ministers, ambassador, distinguished guests, and fellow panelists. First of all, let me say thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Fernandez, from the bottom of my heart for your gracious hospitality and the warmth of your kind nation. You have gathered us here for a great cause. We certainly will all go home, far or near, with two major accomplishments in our hand. One is thankfulness for your indulgence in our 16,000 miles away conflict in the Middle East. Second, our own participation and contribution, each of us, in furthering the dialogue for peace. This is the very same essence of today's sessions on the role of NGOs in building and making peace. It is you, it is you, it is you, it is each and every one of you who can make a difference. The First Lady of Egypt says, if you want things to be different, you have to make them different. And I think in today's session, we're going to see how some of you can make that difference and how some of you can contribute to a better world. Before I start, let me just give you a little background on the role of NGOs and the startup of NGOs globally. I don't know how many of you know that in today's world, there's over 5 million NGOs around the world working in all fields and sectors of life. There's about 40,000 of those that are international, and there's about 1,400 of those that work on peace-related matters. International NGOs have started almost in 1839 with the Rotary Club, which have become the most famous and biggest probably around the world. The phrase NGO came into popular use with the establishment of the United Nations Article 71 of Chapter 10 of the UN Charter. The first definition by UN is given in Resolution 288, known of the ECOSOC in 1950. The types of NGOs that are referred to are those that are charitable services, empowering, participatory. Some focus on national, international, community, or citywide. Many are called volunteers, civil society, social movements, self-help, organization, non-state actor, donors, advocates, not-for-profit, and non-profit organizations. Most operate through conducting either program activities and acting as lobbyists. So we heard a lot about mistrust yesterday. We heard a lot about the role of social societies coming in and helping in building peace. And I think in today's session, hopefully, we can come up with one thing that we can all do, which is to take the message that we discussed here back to our communities, back to our cities, back to our countries, and try and engage in making peace in the Middle East that is no longer about the Middle East, it's about the globe. The peace in the Middle East, by default, now impact peace globally. So before I start, I want to introduce some of our distinguished panelists here, and I want to start, of course, with Mr. Gabriel Bannon, economist, journalist, politician, former advisor of the French President Pompidou, committed all his life now to the peace in the Middle East since almost the 90s. Thank you, Mr. Bannon. Secondly, Dr. Ziad Asadi, a medical doctor, hasn't operated on me yet, and a long-term activist in the Middle East affairs, member and of the Chairman Council of the American Arab Anti-Discrimination, and also president of the American Palestinian Task Force. Thank you, Dr. Asadi. Mr. Kobi, a businessman who devotes half of his time between civil society organizations and NGOs who focus on Jewish-Arab relation and cooperation in Israel and the Middle East. Dr. Victor Atalla, a medical doctor, president of the Atalla Foundation, involved in numerous social community building awareness in the Dominican Republic, Haiti, South Africa, and shortly to come in the Middle East. Mrs. Duret Aldar, a PhD graduate from the Hebron University of Jerusalem, a teacher of events program for mediation and reconciliation at the Tel Aviv University, author of the two-book on violence against women and divorce, former national director of the Family Court Social Services in Israel. And finally, Mr. Said Irakat. So I will start with Mr. Bannon, please.
Thank you. Monsieur le Président, Madame la Première Dame, Messieurs les ambassadeurs, Mesdames et Messieurs. I am going to switch, of course, to English immediately. But we have in the assistance the French ambassador to Dominican Republic. And I remember when I was a member of the French president's staff, we had to speak French. And Pompidou was telling me always, if you cannot speak French, so don't speak. Well, I will not speak in French. French is a diplomatic language. But today we have not to be diplomat. We have to see the facts. So I think the English is much better. All the people here around the tables yesterday show us that we want peace. Everyone, Israeli and Palestinian, was convinced that we have to go to peace. And it was a consensus that we know all the problems about the peace and we know all the solutions. So why we don't succeed? Why we go from disappointment, frustration, hope, and frustration? The panels yesterday came to the conclusion that if we want really to move on, Palestinian and Israeli need a leadership courageous and strong. That's not the situation. And here is the role of the population. As any country, in Palestine and in Israel, you have a majority of the population that we name in French la majorité silencieuse, that don't express anything, sometimes even don't go to vote. Here is the role of the action of the social society, civil society, excuse me. When we heard everyone talking, we are all happy. We see that we are all agree about the problem. And when we are back home in Palestine or in Israel, the behavior and the language become different. Mistrust, we say. Yeah, in Israel, they say between them, we cannot trust Palestine. I want peace, but we cannot trust Palestine. And we raise the children by learning them that the land from the sea to the Jordan River have been given by God to us. So how a child can understand that we have to give back a part of it? In Palestine, we have the same behavior. We don't trust that Israelis want peace. We see them as only a torturer. They raise the children in a map where even Israel don't exist. So all this, I think, is a basic change to make a public opinion ready for peace. Because if you have a public opinion strong and want really peace and have the behavior for peace, the head of the government, their leaders are more ready to go on and to take the risk of peace. So I think we have to multiply the activity of the civil society to influence, to create the change needed in the public opinion in Israel and in Palestine. It's 1 year ago, with some friends here, we have created a group named Group of Co, because it was in Switzerland where we created. And it is Israeli and Palestinian that don't want to talk, as we say, the politically correct. They want to talk of the reality, and they want to act on by several actions on the public opinion, to change the public opinion. We are convinced that no government, no power outside Israel and Palestine, even it is the most powerful nation of the world, can impose peace. Only the people can impose to their government to go to peace. And here is the role of the civil society. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bannon. Thank you, Mr. Bannon, very much. So I see here you put on your hat of being a businessman and an economist, asking us to try and multiply the activities of the civil society to create peace, which I think is a very welcomed invitation. So as we start, we talked about making a difference approach, and we have with us here some that have really made a difference, and I want them to explore with us how can we engage the civil society? How can we engage the NGOs in making peace? And I want to start with Dr. Asali to share his experience and showcase to us how can that be possible? How do you create peace through the work you do every day?
Thank you. Once again, thank you, Mr. President and Madam Fernandez. This is totally impressive that you show up every day and night and show a major commitment. So thank you very much. I want to thank Hassan, and I want to thank Mustafa and for the whole team for putting this together. And of course, we all hope to work together in order to move this thing forward. It is a significant event, I think. I have a story to tell about the United States, about what we do in the United States. This is we spent a couple of decades basically demonstrating at Lafayette Park as we push our advocacy, which had its role. And eventually we have learned serious lessons that made us put together an organization called American Task Force on Palestine back in 2003. We worked out on the premises for this organization for over a year as what it is that we want to do. And we ended up with fundamental concepts. The main concept that it is in our national interest to establish a state of Palestine alongside Israel. So that's what somebody, when you say, what do you mean our? We say American national interest. So we put ourselves in a position that we can define the national American interest like everybody else. This is the fundamental, I think, underpinning of everything else we do. We realized there is no military solution. We realized that the zero-sum game is failed and will not succeed. And furthermore, it contradicts the very concept of compromise of a two-state solution, which we identified as a very clear objective. We had to have a clear message, and we had to convey it in many ways. The shocking thing I want to say to us is that how easy it was to actually use the name of Palestine in an organization and have the kind of welcome that we had in Washington, D.C. We dealt with the establishment. We had no money and no votes, the two major pillars of influence on policy. So we had to have an added value. We had two that we identified as possible for us. One is credibility. Now, credibility might sound like a slogan. Sustaining credibility is very hard and very costly, and it comes at a price, even with your own community, that is very high. But you cannot have double speak. You must speak to all audiences the same language and state the same objectives. I like to think that we have sustained that, and that made it possible for us to, many things that we have actually accomplished. The other thing is that we had to have an added value. What is it that we're doing? Why are we there in the mix? In fact, we have access. We have a lot of access in Washington, D.C. And sometimes some of my Jewish friends kind of joke with me and say, well, how come you have all this access and we don't? I say it's a supply of law and demand. There's just one of us, and there are so many of you. The idea of advocating for Palestine in the United States is problematic by definition. The image of Palestine is terrible. The image of Palestine is one that has been created over decades. It is terrorism, it's thuggery, it's the other, it's the people who are against us, the people who want to kill us, and the people who do not tell the truth and all that. We had to fight that as part of what we were fighting. So we had several objectives. Policy, we wanted to impact policy of the United States. Actually had the audacity to say that we have a position on the national interest, that, that we need the state of Palestine as an issue of national interest. We articulated that publicly in 2003. So now it is national policy. We haven't, influenced the policy that much, but at least we articulated it correctly. And now both presidents have identified it as such. We're gratified. The quartet, which is the whole world, is doing that. Two-state solution. I think that's important. The other thing is politics. I think I mentioned yesterday that politics has frustrated policy everywhere. politics, local politics in the United States, local politics in Israel, local politics in Palestine had made it possible, impossible to move from the conception of a two-state to actually a two-state solution. For this, it was clear that we had to work with other like-minded people in the United States and abroad to establish links that makes the politics easier on all of us. And that led us clearly, and it was preconceived, that we must have relations with the Jewish American community. We must have relations with Israel. We must have relations with the Israeli embassy, with the media, with etc., and be public about this and pay the price. It's not easy. I can tell you it's not easy. It was not easy then, it still is not easy. It meant that you have to have a partnership amongst pretty much honorable people at the core who would advocate the same approach. And above all, we had what I believe is a very special relation with the Palestinian leadership now. And it has been very helpful, we like to think. So we had to cover all these things, but we also had to have programs. And this is something that I would very highly recommend that people start conceptualizing as to how to translate concepts to programs. The programs meant what can we do in Palestine other than preach, some political analysis and tell them what's the latest thinking in Washington about this or that, which is of value, of course, but you need to have something else. And we put together, something else called American Charities for Palestine, which is a tool to upgrade strategically health and education. You cannot sustain peace in Palestine with the degradation of the educational system and the healthcare system that exists now. It's just not sustainable. You might sign agreements. And of course, it is a way to provide services and to lure away people from despair and extremism. We've had, a mechanism that we worked with the government of the United States, NSC, Treasury, etc., to vet the recipients so that USAID, which is a government agency, would say it's okay to give money to hospital X or school Y. And that made it possible for us to send computers and money and all kinds of things that are of interest in no time at all. So we leveraged the United States position and government ability to deliver in a workable relations with the Israelis to actually do things. And I think this is something that, that promises to be very significant. Now, I think at the core, there has to be a realization that people matter. People matter. And people globally matter. And the fact that people like us who just kind of declare themselves to be interested in this issue have access to power at this level is kind of, really strange in America. But I'm sure that it is possible everywhere if there is a level of commitment, especially if there is a trend that is created. And here's where we need media. Media is desperately needed to convey the message of people working together, Jews, Palestinians, like you have in this continent, and with their neighbors and with their governments to actually achieve something. It is not a zero-sum game. The zero-sum game will never yield a two-state solution. And although, in their private conversations, everybody goes that and huddles with their group, did you see what I did to him? Did you see what I said to him? Bad news. You can say that, but you're not serious, and it will come across. There has to be a degree of honor and integrity at the core of the people who do this sort of thing. And I think I've taken more time than I anticipated. Thank you very much, and I wish you the best of luck. Unfortunately, I have to catch a plane. And once again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Asali. So Dr. Asali's summary points, he agrees that peace in the Middle East is a matter of global national security importance. He sees that NGOs now create an added value that can influence decision maker, that can influence policy maker. He encourages NGOs to turn their concepts into programs and activities, and his model is about leveraging his ability to contact and work with government to foster his work for peace. And he also sees that media involvement in showing people working together is vital to making peace. So that's interesting, very interesting model, one where you leverage the relationship with the government to make peace. Now, I also remind you that there are many NGOs around the world who tend to work independently, and both of them are working for a good cause. So let's now go to Mr. Kobi and hear his view as a businessman and somebody that has been able to utilize the activities between Arab and Israeli in trying to make peace. What do you see make a difference?
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. President, for having us here. This is an inspiring event and a learning experience as well. When talking about the role of civil society in conflict areas, conflict zones, and before addressing it, I think we need to look at the context of civil society activities in general. There is a new role for civil society which is shaping itself in the next, I believe, the next decade. One friend of mine defined it as civil society ends when government finish, or starts, or end, and really become the launch pad for government. In other words, where governments are missing execution power, civil society comes to play, or when governments miss thought leadership, that's when civil society needs to kick in. I also believe that we are seeing civil society not in isolation. We see a triangle of civil society, the business community, and governments, sometimes working together and sometimes working in confrontation. And the last point, the very basic assumption when starting to look at the role of civil society is to have an acceptance of what I would call structural optimism. Something that I would label sometimes irrational optimism, being irrationally optimistic if you want to achieve something, because the odds are against us. And I believe that my friend has discussed something of that nature. When looking at the roles, the first thing that I see is thought leadership. The role to challenge institutional thinking, to challenge the common sense or the common thinking amongst governments, research institutions, and to bring the view from the streets, the view from the grassroots. Sometimes those views may look unrealistic, sometimes they look naive, but often they have an impact. I do see examples of this approach in what happened in Israeli society since, by and large, 2003, when the idea of two-state solutions have become a more mainstream idea. And I think it started with initiatives like the Ayalon Nusseibeh approach and 7 Points Agreement, the ideas developed in the Greenhouse think tank, most importantly, in the Geneva Initiative. The Geneva Initiative has become some sort of a benchmark, of a baseline to which we compare solutions and all thinking in the direction of a two-state solution. The collective impact of these organizations and these activities, I believe, has led to the positions that former Prime Minister Olmert presented to Abu Mazen just 2 years ago. They may have not been sufficient, but they definitely represented a breakthrough. And this is an example of the role civil society played in legitimizing non-institutional, out-of-the-box thinking. So that's role number one. The second role is something that is sometimes, to me, even more important. And that is the ability to legitimize the post-agreement reality. In other words, try to bring the future forward. Let's not wait until we have an agreement or sorts of agreements. Let's see what needs to be done today in order to legitimize that. And let me give you some examples. by outreaching and by creating projected future, we are legitimizing some of the thinking that enables people to accept the fact that peace is possible. And we do it in small steps. One example that I'm fairly familiar with was the formation, again, through a combination of civil society effort, government, and business community, the formation of Al-Bawader, a venture capital firm, which is the first venture capital firm to invest in Israeli Arab communities, business communities. This has started as an idea of two people, developed into an organizational approach, which called itself Al-Bawader, then was able to generate interest in the government. But most importantly, when we started this effort 3 years ago, 2 business people in Israel were willing to talk to us. If you look today at the people who invested in Al-Bawader venture capital firm, you will be amazed to see the entire Israeli tycoon families, the most important and most impressive investors list, that have realized over the past 3 years that this is a true, not just a true business opportunity, but a true national priority to create one state, one economy solution. I can give you more examples on how the future is being created today. I'll give one more. There's a small village not too far from where I live called Ein Shemer. There's an ecological greenhouse project there which brings Jewish and Arab kids to do nothing else than study life sciences and to do research and study the importance of water, energy, and ecological systems. When they do this research together, there's no difference between Jews and Arabs. The results are shared, and the experience is shifting or reframing the concerns from today's animosity to future possibilities in science. I would urge us to look at next generations as the most important field of activities for civil society. Last but not least, I think the role of civil society in conflict zones is to reflect and create mindset shifts, each civil society in its own society or looking at its own complex society. If we look at Israeli society post-agreement, we know there will be a need to embrace the settlers who will come back to the State of Israel. Regardless of what we think about their political positions or their ideologies, at the end of the day, it's a humanistic undertaking to make sure that they find a new home with us in the country. There are organizations who already work on that, and who already work on being prepared for the day when settlers will come back. There are people who work on the foundations of what it means to have shared living, shared society, shared citizenship, in the day where we have a peaceful two-state solution, yet we have a diverse Israeli society. Still, with Jews, Arabs, with various factions, various ideologies, but we need to find the internal peace inside us. And again, some of the groups begin to work on this today. One final example to mindset shift is something that I'm happy to share with you. It's a project that is really just beginning. It's a cooperation between Jewish and Arab business people to develop a communication and media vehicle that will bring to the world and will expose all the good things that do happen on the ground and are one of the best kept secrets. Our project, the Empathy Project, is going to really show how Jews and Arabs in Israel and later on in the Middle East are able to do things together, and how they can do it based on the very simple value systems of being a human being, of adhering to empathic desire to understand and learn and realize who the other people are. And again, to do it at both children level and by addressing opinion leaders. So to summarize, I think civil society has a role in thought leadership and preempting or igniting diplomatic thinking and challenge governments to think differently. I think civil society should outreach and build building blocks of the future today, and it should finally create an effort for internal and social cohesion once peace is established. Last but not least, we talk about civil society, but we should talk about civil society of individuals. It is my belief that, just by watching members of my family, that sometimes you don't need an association, you don't need an institution, you don't need a civil society organization, you just need to use your personal friendship and develop one-to-one civil society initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Kobe. So clearly Kobe sees that the people-to-people approach is very, very vital and very successful. He also sees the need to collectively bundle the economic efforts along with all the collective efforts that can bring people and create opportunities and hope for tomorrow. He would like to invite us to think of legitimizing the idea of bringing the future forward. Thank you, Kobe. I want to go to Albert San, and I'm sorry I haven't introduced you earlier, teacher of international law and a businessman active in the pro-peace movement in Argentina. Please.
En primera instancia, quiero felicitar al presidente Fernández por haber tenido esta iniciativa que trasciende en mucho, me parece, la actividad de quienes hoy estamos aquí presentes y que significa, en mi humilde opinión, una clara indicación en el sentido correcto de que si América Latina pretende para sí un rol de reconocimiento significativo como región en este mundo globalizado, debe interesarse por problemas globales. Y no cabe la más mínima duda de que el problema del Medio Oriente, el conflicto árabe-israelí, es un problema global y haber tenido esta clarividencia, haber tenido este coraje, es digno de un reconocimiento que trato de hacerlo porque así me parece que es merecido. En segundo lugar, entre otras cosas, soy profesor de Derecho Internacional. Ayer he escuchado con suma atención las distintas posiciones de los representantes de los diferentes intereses, de los distintos pueblos concernidos en este largo conflicto. Y debo manifestar mi perplejidad por haber sido testigo de un intercambio de posiciones donde lo que ha primado son referencias a situaciones de hechos típicas de la realpolitik. No ha habido referencias a encuadres jurídicos, a principios de orden del derecho internacional que sostengan ambas posiciones. Y eso me parece una omisión preocupante en aras a tratar de obtener un análisis o ideas que conlleven la posibilidad de encontrar a este diferendo una solución estable, permanente, duradera, porque en mi humilde opinión parece difícil lograr un acuerdo de estas características sin referirlo a ningún principio de derecho, sin referirlo a ninguna valoración de justicia. Yo quiero comentar una humilde experiencia que tenemos países latinoamericanos. Argentina y Chile comparten la tercera frontera en extensión del mundo. No hemos estado ajenos a situaciones de conflicto a la hora de definir el territorio entre los estados. Entre el Tratado General de Límites de 1891 y el último diferendo resuelto en el año 1999, se resolvieron por distintas herramientas del derecho internacional, sea la negociación directa, sea el arbitraje, 621 conflictos de delimitación. 621 conflictos de límites son los que hemos tenido con Chile. Y nuestra experiencia histórica, acudir a esas herramientas que da el derecho internacional para resolver pacíficamente esas controversias, que algunas de ellas han sido significativas, nos han puesto al borde de la confrontación bélica, como pasó en el año 1979, nos ha sido de mucha utilidad. Y esta experiencia también la tienen muchos países latinoamericanos que han tenido que pasar por circunstancias parecidas. Bueno, hechas estas pequeñas aclaraciones, me da la sensación que debo decir que todo lo que signifique participación de la sociedad civil o de las organizaciones que representan a la sociedad civil en un conflicto de esta naturaleza, obligan a hacer una distinción entre lo que en este momento es urgente y es importante en este conflicto. No tengo duda de que lo urgente es que mientras dure este conflicto, la población de los territorios ocupados tenga la posibilidad de vivir con derechos básicos respetados, que tenga la posibilidad de tener una actividad individual, una actividad asociativa que le permita desarrollar rasgos característicos de normalidad. Recién un expositor preopinante refería a la necesidad de fortalecer las instituciones educativas en Palestina. Recién se comentaban experiencias sumamente interesantes acerca de intentos asociativos entre particulares, israelíes y palestinos, buscando la forma de generar intereses asociativos, intereses cooperativos más allá del conflicto, y esto es sumamente útil, pero no tiene posibilidad de prosperar en la medida que no existan instituciones de la sociedad civil, y en este aspecto es necesario reconocer que es muy difícil que esas asociaciones puedan existir, que estas entidades puedan existir cuando se da una ocupación de las características que padece en este momento el pueblo palestino en los territorios ocupados y en especial en la Franja de Gaza. Sin lugar a duda, no sé de qué modo, porque esto evidentemente es un problema sumamente complejo, pero da la sensación, al menos de la perspectiva que lo miramos nosotros, de que Israel podría, en lo sustancial, garantizarse a sí mismo y solicitar apoyo a la comunidad internacional para garantizarse cierta y efectivamente su derecho a una existencia segura, quizás causando menores mortificaciones de las que padece en este momento el pueblo palestino. Yo no hablo como testigo desde la lejanía. Yo estuve en los territorios ocupados en el año 2008, estuve una semana viviendo con una familia palestina en Belén, y he sido testigo personal, he transitado los territorios, he visto las vicisitudes cotidianas de trasladarse en los territorios ocupados, y por cierto, es difícil pensar que en esas condiciones pueda desarrollarse la actividad normal de asociaciones civiles. Es sumamente difícil verificarlo en esas condiciones de existencia. No tengo duda de que la modificación, vuelvo a reiterarlo, sin ser especialista en cuestiones de seguridad, evidentemente aquí hay situaciones sumamente complejas, pero da la sensación de que buena fe, buena voluntad, puesta en este sentido, como un mensaje claro dirigido hacia abrir un camino hacia la paz. Permitir que el otro deje de ser el otro para ser un semejante. Hay una sociedad que evidentemente es lo que le ha dado una posición sumamente consolidada en este conflicto a Israel, que está organizada, que está articulada, que más allá de los episodios que por cierto condenamos, que han irrumpido en la posibilidad del desarrollo de esa vida normal, está organizada, tiene posibilidades de llevar adelante una vida casi normal, que es la situación del Estado de Israel. Bueno sería que eso se diese entre los habitantes de Palestina y los intereses comunes irán apareciendo espontáneamente, naturalmente. Y a partir de la aparición de estas sociedades, sin lugar a duda, el diálogo por la paz se enriquecerá muchísimo más de lo que hemos visto hasta el presente. Gracias, esto era...
Translation and sound, but we got the sound back now, more powerful. I hope that we can get the translation back. I'm not sure if we're working on it. I'd like just to summarize very briefly what has been said by the last speaker, Dr. Albazarin from Argentina. Essentially, he has been focusing on the idea that in our discussion yesterday or today, we have missed the role of international law in addressing the conflicts between Israel and Palestine and Israel and the Arab world. The role of international law is pivotal in helping address the problems and solving conflicts. There have been numerous conflicts between Chile and Argentina over the years. And the best way that these conflicts have been addressed have been through international law. So the whole idea of having norms, of having rules, of having international law as a framework to address conflicts is a way to make it viable, a solution to the different conflicts. He has been witness directly in Palestine, he was there for about a week, about how people behave in their interrelationships. And it has to do, at the end, with a question of identity and understanding the other side's views on the problems. But overall, is just underlying the role of international law in the resolution of international conflicts. I think this has been the main message that you have wanted to portray.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much.